I'm Evelyn, and I was born just 4 minutes before my younger sister. Just 4 minutes, but enough to shape a lifetime of unfairness. My sister Natalie and I are twins. We grew up in the same two-story house in suburban Salem, Oregon. But if anyone had stepped inside, they'd never believe we were sisters, let alone twins. My mom used to joke with her friends that Natalie was her perfect little copy-gentle, feminine, stylish since birth. I, on the other hand, was too strong, too independent, too unladylike, in her words. As a kid, I didn't understand why Natalie always got everything before me. Princess dresses, toy kitchen sets, even the things I wished for but never had the chance to ask. On our 7th birthday, Natalie got an outdoor party, a 3-tier cake, and an instant camera. I was assigned to clean up afterward. When I asked why, my mom gave a dismissive smile and said, "Because you're the older sister, you should learn to share. Don't be selfish." The favoritism didn't stop at gifts. At meals, Mom always gave Natalie the best portions. If Natalie spilled water or broke a bowl, I got blamed for not watching your sister. When I got an A, Mom nodded like it meant nothing. But if Natalie earned a B+, she bragged to the whole neighborhood. I used to think maybe I was clumsy or just not good enough, but the older I got, the more I realized it wasn't about me doing something wrong. It was that I had never been looked at with fairness. I was a plan B in the very house I was born into. My dad, a quiet man who avoided conflict, never once stood up for me. He openly doted on Natalie, calling her his little princess, driving her to ballet every Saturday while I rode my bike alone to art class. Once, I asked him why he never came to watch me compete in art contests. He sighed and said, "You're already good. You don't need praise." It sounded encouraging, but all I felt was an emptiness that grew day by day. The only one who truly saw me, really saw me, was my grandmother. She was the first to teach me how to hold a paintbrush and always had butter cookies ready when I was down. She once said, "Evelyn, you're like me. People don't notice you right away, but once they do, they can't look away." I held on to that like a shield whenever I got hurt. I learned not to expect anything from my parents. I taught myself how to do homework alone, how to sew up my old clothes while Natalie went shopping with Mom. I learned to hold back tears when Mom said, "Why do you always look so grumpy? Be more like Natalie." I thought things would change when we got older, but they didn't. When we turned 18, our parents told me, straight to my face, that the college savings could only cover one of us. And of course, that one was Natalie. They didn't hide it. They weren't even sorry. They just said, "You'll figure it out. You're strong." That sentence repeated in my mind like a sentence being passed. I left home with exactly $217.00 in my account, a suitcase of old clothes, and a laptop my grandmother left me before she passed. Everything I had, none of it came from my parents. And from the moment I stepped out of that house, I swore I'd never let anyone devalue me again. I rented a tiny room near the local community college. The walls were painted a faded yellow. The hardwood floors creaked with every step. But at least it was the first place I could call home. No yelling, no judgment, no denial of who I was. By day, I studied graphic design full-time. By night, I worked as a cashier at a 24-hour convenience store. Sometimes I was so tired I'd nod off while standing at the register. But I never complained. I didn't have the luxury of options. No parental safety net, no savings account in my name, no childhood friends to study with. I had only myself and a handful of dreams not yet realized. I always tried harder than others. Every assignment, I went beyond the requirements. Every personal project, I spent extra hours researching, tweaking, polishing. Partly out of passion, partly to prove I wasn't invisible. And slowly, it paid off. In my second year, I won a full-ride scholarship through a partner program with a prestigious university in Seattle. It was the biggest turning point in my life at that point. I remember my hands shaking as I opened the email. I had to read it 3 times before I believed it. The scholarship didn't just cover tuition, It included a monthly living stipend. For the first time in years, I could quit my night job and actually sleep. I texted my mom to share the news. No response. 2 days later, she replied, "Good. Natalie just got into an advanced yoga course. She'll be teaching soon instead of just following videos." I'm so happy. I reread that message. No matter what I did, it could never compare to Natalie doing yoga. I remember in 12th grade, I won first prize in a statewide art competition, and a famous judge said I had rare artistic instinct. I brought the painting home. Mom glanced at it and said, "So? You're going to be a starving artist? That's not a real career." A week later, Natalie posted a scribble online with the caption, "My first drawing gig." Mom printed it out, framed it, and hung it in the living room. I once told Dad I'd been selected as a teaching assistant for the illustration department, an honor only 2 students in the entire program received. He nodded and changed the subject to how Natalie was thinking about starting a minimalist lifestyle vlog. "She's a natural at sharing. She'll be famous," he laughed. "And you? Well, just keep up the good GPA." I learned to fake a smile instead of arguing. I knew they wouldn't change. To them, Natalie would always be the graceful pride, and I'd be the independent fighter, meaning they could conveniently leave me out because I was strong. But I started to understand. I wasn't striving to impress them. I was striving to free myself from their definitions. I didn't need their approval, but I did need to recognize my own worth. Professor Carson, my mentor, once said, "Evelyn, you have the eye of a visual storyteller, and that's not something you can teach." That sentence lit up my world in those darkest months. I started painting more, uploading my work to a design forum. To my surprise, a digital art magazine reached out and asked to interview me for their Rising Star section. When the article came out, I secretly sent the link to my mom. 3 weeks later, she replied, "Too long." I didn't read all of it, but Natalie just dyed her hair. "It looks amazing." I wasn't angry, I just felt nothing. That's when I knew I had truly grown up, when their silence no longer suffocated me. I printed that interview and slipped it into a journal where I kept everything that made me proud. I knew there were more obstacles ahead. I'd moved to Seattle at 20 to start the transfer program at a top private university, and ironically, just a few months later, Natalie applied and got accepted to the same school. We weren't in the same major. I studied visual communications, she enrolled in marketing communications, but the campus was small enough that I'd catch glimpses of her around lecture halls, the cafeteria, or the library. She always wore an expensive hoodie, spotless sneakers, and a designer bag I knew Mom picked out. I remember the first day of the school year. Natalie arrived in a car Dad rented just for her. I took the bus. Almost an hour from my tiny rental on the edge of the city. I never said it aloud, but every time I stepped through that school gate, I felt like I was walking into a world I didn't belong to. Everything gleamed, everything was polished, and I was all patched up. Natalie lived in the nicest dorm on campus, a double room she paid to have all to herself. Our parents not only covered her full tuition, they sent her a monthly allowance so she could focus without worries. As for me, I worked 3 jobs, waiting tables at a pizza place in the evenings, cleaning the library lobby early mornings, and picking up small freelance design gigs online on weekends. Some nights I barely slept. I worked, I studied, I survived in a tiny room where I had to curl up just to fit on a worn-out sofa left behind by a previous tenant. But I never once complained. Not because I wasn't tired, but because I was so used to having only myself to count on. One time, during a joint visual communication class, the professor assigned a group presentation. Natalie and I were placed in the same group. Coincidence or irony, I still don't know. During the discussion, I suggested a campaign using illustrated graphics with interactive video. Natalie scoffed. "That idea's creative, but kind of hard to understand. I think we should go with something simpler, more accessible. Let's do spring fashion, fun, bright, viral." The rest of the group agreed with her, and I, not wanting to cause tension, nodded. I ended up doing all the graphic design, video editing, and effects, while Natalie made the slideshow and gave the main presentation. After class, the professor sent me a private email. "I know you built the foundation of this entire project. You have leadership potential, but you need to learn to speak up and stand by your ideas." I read that email over and over all night. It was both praise and a sting, because he was right. I was always the quiet shadow behind the scenes. Natalie was different. She stood out. She organized photo shoots, ran the fashion club, always knew just what to say to be called charming and confident. On social media, she had thousands of followers. My parents constantly bragged to relatives. "Natalie fits in so quickly. She's a natural leader. She knows how to build a personal brand." And me? My mom once called just to ask, "Did you send groceries to Natalie yet? She said she's been too busy to get to the store this week." I didn't respond. I stood in my cramped kitchen, staring at the discounted pack of ramen in my hand, speechless. I knew I wasn't invisible. I knew I was on the right path. But sometimes, watching Natalie get honored at school events while I stood under the dim lights below, my heart still sank. I wasn't jealous of her. I just wished, just once, my parents could look at me, really look, and say, "You did great, Evelyn." But maybe that would never happen. And in that exact moment, I realized I would stop waiting. Not everyone is born to be acknowledged by the people they most hope to impress. But that doesn't mean they don't deserve it. At the end of my third semester, while most students were planning spring break trips, I quietly applied for internships. No one told me to. No one encouraged me. I read the postings on the school bulletin board, sent out email after email, editing every line of my resume like my future depended on each period. Natalie was different. Over a rare lunch between classes, she said, "Mom told me to just focus on school, not worry about internships yet. Dad will help me get a spot through his connections later." I just smiled. I didn't have those kinds of connections. Eventually, after 7 emails and 3 interviews, I was accepted as a design intern at a creative agency focused on educational media. The pay was low, but the office was cozy, the environment professional, and most importantly, they let me do real work, not filing papers or making coffee. I received feedback, revised my drafts, and saw my designs actually get printed, for the first time. At the same time, I enrolled in an evening advanced class on interactive interface simulation. It only met Friday nights, and barely anyone was interested, but I knew it was a skill employers were looking for. I cut my pizza shop shifts and made up for it with extra freelance gigs on weekends. Life back then was all about sketches, deadlines, and instant noodles, but I felt like I was living, not just surviving. One evening after class, Professor Ann Whitmore called me aside. She taught visual communication and was the toughest professor in the department. I never thought she noticed me beyond grading my work. "Evelyn," she said in a calm, firm tone, "I've been following your progress since last semester. Have you ever heard of the Benjamin Ford Honor Scholarship?" I froze. Of course I had. It was the school's most prestigious award, given to senior students with leadership potential in the creative field. It covered tuition, living expenses, and included a 3-month international internship. I swallowed. I read about it, but I didn't think I was qualified. She looked me straight in the eye. "You are, but you'll need a recommendation. I'm willing to write it, if you're serious about applying." That night, I spent hours reviewing the application. When I saw the list of past recipients, top graduates, national award winners with standout personal projects, I started to doubt myself. But then I thought about those mornings mopping library floors, those late nights on the bus ride home just to finish one more draft. I had come too far to stop now out of fear. I began the application. Every personal statement section I wrote and rewrote at least 10 times. I didn't know how to tell my story. the girl without a privileged start who never gave up, in a way that would resonate. So I wrote it exactly as I had lived it. No sugarcoating, no hiding. 2 weeks later, I was called for an interview. Natalie found out. She casually asked, "Wait, you applied for the Ford Scholarship? I thought only, standout students got nominated." I didn't reply. I knew that to her, stand out meant being seen by many. But I chose to stand out by letting my work speak. On results day, I was at my internship when the email came. I had been selected. Not only that, I was one of just 3 students nationwide accepted into the International Internship Program in the Netherlands, a chance I once thought only existed in dreams. I stood in the office, hands trembling, eyes welling up. I didn't call my mom. I didn't text my dad. I didn't post it online. I simply emailed Professor Whitmore. "Thank you. I won't let you down." And silently I told myself, "Evelyn, you don't need anyone's validation. You just proved you're capable, resilient, and more than worthy." I received the Benjamin Ford Fellowship on a crisp March morning in Seattle. The confirmation email popped up while I was making coffee for my coworkers. My heart raced as I read the bold words, "Congratulations, you have been awarded the Benjamin Ford National Fellowship." I had to read it 3 times to believe it. I'd earned one of the top 5 national fellowships. Not by luck, but by every sleepless night, every painstaking revision, and every invisible effort no one had noticed. I did it. And I did it alone. All day I felt like I was floating. Coworkers hugged me. Professor Whitmore sent a short, heartfelt email. "I'm so proud of you, Evelyn." I thought I no longer needed anyone's recognition. But that night, back in my tiny apartment, I opened my phone and messaged my mom. "I just got the Benjamin Ford Scholarship. Only 5 people nationwide were selected. I'm one of them." I stared at the screen, heart fluttering as if hoping for a miracle. Despite all the past letdowns, part of me still wished maybe this time would be different. The message was seen after 11 minutes. 30 minutes later, she replied, "Oh, really? I'm cooking right now. I'll tell Natalie to call you later. She just hit 20,000 views on her new makeup tutorial." I read the message without blinking. A long while later, I closed my phone, set it on the table, and laughed. Not the joyful kind, but the dry, hollow laugh that holds back tears. Natalie never called back. No one asked what the scholarship was, how much it was worth, or what it took to earn it. They didn't care, and if they did, it was only to compare it with a social media video. I should have been angry. But I wasn't. I just felt empty. Maybe because this time, I no longer expected anything. I had learned the hardest truth. Some people, no matter how hard you try, will never see you. 3 days later, I received the official invitation from the scholarship board, along with an invite to the awards ceremony in New York the following month. Flights, hotel, everything was fully covered. I stood in my room holding the thick cardstock letter, feeling like I was finally holding what I'd always longed for: recognition, respect, and real worth. Ooh, I didn't post anything online. No photos, no status updates. I just took a picture of the invitation and sent it to my grandma, the one person who had truly seen me. She was gone, but I still kept her number in my phone, still wrote to her when I had something to share. This time I wrote, "Grandma, I did it. You once said the world would notice me one day. Today I believe you were right." The night before I flew to New York, I got a call from my dad, a rare thing. He simply said, "Your mom mentioned you got some scholarship. That's good, congratulations." Then silence. No follow-up questions, no more words. I almost replied, but didn't. Maybe silence was the only way to end a conversation that had never truly begun. I boarded the plane with a small suitcase, wearing the one formal dress I borrowed from a classmate, a navy blue, simple but elegant. During the award ceremony, when my name was called, the whole room stood and applauded. I walked onto the stage under bright lights, but my heart was completely clear. I didn't need family in the front row. I didn't need proud looks from my parents. I had made it here, and no one could take that from me. I realized sometimes you can't force others to see your worth, but you can create that worth and live a life that makes them regret ever doubting you. The award hall in New York glowed with camera flashes and lights. Around me sat top students, respected professors, and executives from major U.S. media companies. The atmosphere was formal but not stiff, and inside I felt oddly calm. When the host took the stage and began announcing the Inspirational Leader of the Year award, a special title given to just one Benjamin Ford Fellow, I expected nothing more than to applaud someone else's moment. But then he said my name. Evelyn Brooks, a communication design student from Seattle who overcame every barrier, financial and personal, to rise by her own merit and extraordinary will. I didn't catch the rest. The room stood, the lights turned toward me, and I walked onto the stage to long applause. I accepted the glass trophy, my hands trembling slightly, but my eyes unwavering. This moment was mine, and I knew I had earned it. After the ceremony, I was invited backstage to a private networking event for standout candidates. There, I met Jacqueline Myers, the creative director of a multinational media company and someone I had idolized since high school. "Evelyn, I've read your file," she said, shaking my hand. Her gaze was sharp but warm. "You don't just have talent, you have grit. We'd like to offer you a spot in our mentorship program for rising creatives. We'll cover all your living expenses through the end of the year so you can focus fully on growing your skills." I held my breath. This wasn't just an opportunity. It was a turning point. I left the event under the soft, glowing lights of New York City. My phone buzzed nonstop, messages from friends, professors, even people I didn't know who had seen the short video of my speech posted online. Within a few hours, it had been shared thousands of times. I opened a message from an unknown number. It was my mom. "I just watched your speech. You spoke so confidently. Your father saw it too. He said, 'Maybe we never really understood you.'" A short message, no apology, no direct acknowledgement, but it was the first time they admitted that there might be something about me worth reconsidering. I didn't respond right away. I needed time. Not to forgive, but to figure out whether I still needed their approval at all. The next day, Natalie called. I hesitated but picked up. "Hey." Her voice was softer than usual. "I just watched your video. I didn't think you were that good." I said nothing. She continued, slower this time. I'm sorry for always looking down on you. I thought you just doodled to pass the time, but I was wrong. I didn't feel happy or sad, just empty. Because apologies, especially late ones, can't undo the past. I had come too far to turn around and search for validation. I answered, calmly. "Thank you, Natalie. I hope you find something worth chasing too. Not for Mom and Dad, but for yourself." The conversation ended in silence. But for the first time, there wasn't that invisible competition between us anymore. Maybe we'd go our separate ways. And that was enough. That night, I sat by the hotel window, watching the city lights reflect on the glass table. I opened my laptop, pulled up my inbox, and typed my first reply to Ms. Myers. "I'm ready. Thank you for believing in me." Under those lights, I knew I had stepped through a major door, not into someone else's world of success, but into a life I chose and owned. I was no longer Evelyn, the one overlooked behind Natalie, no longer the strong one who didn't need care. I was just me. And for the first time, that was enough. 2 weeks after I returned from the awards ceremony, my mom unexpectedly called and invited me home for dinner. "Something warm and cozy?" she said. Her voice over the phone sounded different, gentler, like she was testing the waters to see if I'd refuse. I paused for a few seconds, then said yes. I didn't know what waited for me in that house after all those years of emotional distance, but I knew it was time to face it. Not to hold on, but to let go. That afternoon, the old house on Evergreen Street looked just as I remembered it. Cream curtains, plaid fabric sofa, the old tilted family photo on the wooden shelf. But something had changed. Maybe it was me. Or the way they looked at me. Mom stepped out of the kitchen, towel in hand, her eyes cautious but hopeful. Dad sat in the living room, wearing reading glasses I knew he wasn't using. Natalie was there too, perched on the staircase, silently watching. Dinner started with small talk. Mom mentioned the new neighbors. Dad asked about the weather in New York. Natalie threw in a comment about a new marketing class she'd enrolled in. I listened quietly, feeling like a guest in the house I once called home. After the dishes were cleared, Mom invited me into the living room. Dad had removed his glasses and was looking at me, for once, without hiding anything. "We want to talk to you," Mom began. "About everything. And about what's happened." I sat up straight, hands resting on my knees. "I'm listening." Mom glanced at Dad, then back at me. "We know we weren't fair to you. I'm sorry. But back then, things were hard. We just thought you were strong. You'd be fine." I took a deep breath. Yeah, I know. I heard that my whole life. That I'm strong, that I'd figure it out, that I didn't need anything. My voice wasn't raised, but every word sliced through the air like a thin blade. I looked straight into their eyes, unflinching, for the first time. "But did you ever think," I continued, voice trembling, "that I wanted to be weak, too? That I wished, just once, you'd ask, 'Are you tired? Are you okay?' But you never did. And now, honestly, I don't need it anymore." My dad looked away, a flicker of shame in his eyes. Mom nodded, her eyes red but dry. "You're still our daughter," she said softly. "Can we start over?" I smiled, bittersweet but calm. Start over? Maybe, but it won't be the same, because now I have boundaries. I don't need approval anymore. I don't live for one-sided love. If you want to know who I am, I'll share, but if not, I won't wait. Natalie had stayed silent on the stairs through the whole conversation. As I stood to grab my bag, ready to leave, she called out, "Evelyn." I turned. She walked over, a little hesitant. "Do you think you made things harder? I mean, now Mom and Dad compare everything to you. I feel like I'll never be enough." I looked at her, really looked. Natalie, once wrapped in layers of favoritism, now stood lost and unsure. "I never did anything to make you feel less," I said gently. "I just lived the life I deserved. And you can too. But you'll have to stand up on your own. Stop waiting for Mom and Dad to pave the way." Natalie lowered her head, saying nothing more. I didn't blame her. I knew that if I was once the shadow behind her spotlight, now the roles were slowly reversing. And that scared her. On the way home, I rolled down the car window, letting the wind carry away the weight of the evening. I didn't feel angry or hurt, just light. I moved to New York on a June morning, the sun soft, the breeze dancing through the city streets like the city itself was welcoming me. My suitcase clicked along the stone pavement, and in my chest was a mix of nerves and freedom. A new chapter opening, one I had chosen myself. The media company where I'd met Ms. Jacqueline Myers officially welcomed me to the creative team as an assistant project director. It was my first job after graduation, and the first place where my skills were truly valued. The office sat on the 22nd floor of a glass building near Midtown Manhattan. Every morning, I walked from my cozy Brooklyn apartment, coffee in hand, catching the scent of pastries from street vendors. Life in New York was fast and loud, but to me, it was a symphony of freedom and ambition. I had never felt like I belonged anywhere the way I did here. The job was demanding, but I thrived in the chaos. Intense brainstorming meetings, late-night idea revisions, projects displayed on billboards in Times Square. It all made me feel alive. Occasionally, I got messages from my mom, mostly holiday wishes, health updates, or distant family news I no longer cared about. I always replied, Polite, respectful. Not cold, but no longer close. There was now a soft distance between us. Not painful, but wide enough that I no longer expected anything. Natalie messaged me sometimes, too. A picture from her new yoga class, a fun video with her friends. Once, just a message. I suddenly remembered that pumpkin soup you used to make. I didn't know if it was a memory or an unspoken apology. I simply replied, "Yeah, I still remember how to make it." Even after letting go, sometimes, in the quiet nights of the city that never sleeps, my heart still tightened when I thought about family. Not because I was angry, because I had once loved them so much, I forgot myself. I focused on building a new world, a life not based on others' expectations. I learned to cook better, decorated my small apartment with my own artwork, occasionally attended weekend exhibits. My friends in New York were all self-made, people who had stumbled but stood back up. They didn't know my past, and I didn't need them to. One evening, over drinks with friends after work, someone asked me, "Evelyn, you always seem so strong and composed. Have you ever needed someone to lean on?" I smiled, without bitterness. I have, but I learned to lean on myself. And honestly, it's not a bad feeling. This city has taught me many things. That I don't need anyone to define me. That distance doesn't always mean loss. Sometimes, it's a space to reflect and realize what truly matters. I'm no longer the girl who waited for a father's glance, a mother's praise, or a genuine hug from her sister. I'm Evelyn, the version of myself that I had to fight to become. I still call home on major holidays. Mom talks more now, mostly about health, recipes, or what flowers the neighbor just planted. Dad usually just says hi, then goes quiet. Natalie sometimes jumps in with small talk. We all know the connection now is just a gentle obligation, not a tether of the heart. I left, not to run, but to begin a new life. One where I didn't need anyone's permission to live honestly. And here, in this city that never sleeps, I've finally awakened. I turned 26 on a clear fall morning in New York. No loud parties, no glowing candles on a cake, just a hot cup of coffee, a small pastry roll, and the soft sunlight spilling through the fifth-floor apartment window I now called home. I spent the morning reflecting on how far I'd come. From the child living in her sister's shadow, to the student juggling jobs at night, to the woman I am now. With a job I love, kind friends, and a little space of my own where I could breathe without walking on eggshells. I realized I no longer thought of my family with sadness or longing for approval. The half-hearted birthday calls from my mother became something I no longer expected. I still replied politely, but my heart wasn't in it. It wasn't indifference. It was peace. I used to think family was unchanging, that I had to earn love from the people who raised me. But the truth is, some relationships exist only out of habit and duty, not understanding or presence. One evening after work, I stayed late at the office to finish the final draft of a new project plan. The soft light poured over the desk as I looked up at the bulletin board, covered in notes, sketches, and reminders. And suddenly it hit me, this was all built by me. No one pushed me to succeed, no one held my hand. Every achievement was mine alone. I never had a family who stood behind me, lifting me up, but I had something even more valuable. Belief in myself, even when the world didn't believe in me. I built a life not on a foundation laid out for me, but from broken pieces I wasn't sure could ever fit together. My friends, the ones I chose, often tell me I have a quiet kind of magnetism. Not because I'm loud or flashy, but because I always show up with steadiness. And they don't know how long it took for me to become steady, how often I wanted to disappear just to feel less lost. I used to think that if my parents saw me succeed, they would change. But now I understand, not everyone is ready to admit they were wrong, especially when that wrong has lasted for years. And I don't need that admission anymore. Love, it turns out, isn't something you chase endlessly in others. It begins the moment you stop chasing and start finding it within. I started journaling again. Not to complain, but to record the small things I was grateful for. A traffic-free morning, a compliment from my boss, or the neighbor's cat tapping at my window for cookies. I realized happiness doesn't come from grand gestures. It lives in the ability to notice beauty in the simplest of things. One Sunday afternoon, I walked through Central Park. Golden leaves scattered the paths, and a violinist played a soft lullaby in the distance. I sat on a bench and opened my phone to a message from Natalie. I know I wasn't the sister you hoped for, but I'm trying. Thank you for not hating me, even when I was selfish. I smiled. I didn't feel regret. I didn't feel that it was too late. We might never be those picture-perfect sisters, but I no longer resented her. We'd grown up, and each of us was learning what it meant to be an adult in our own way. I closed my phone and took a deep breath. I'm still Evelyn, the girl who once dreamed of a warm family, who once broke down for being unseen, who once believed she wasn't enough. But now I know. I don't have to be enough in anyone else's eyes. I only need to be honest with myself. One spring morning, I sat in my small Brooklyn apartment. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting soft shadows across my desk as I sketched the first concepts for a personal project. Not for a client, not for anyone waiting, just because I wanted to, because I loved it. And I realized I had never felt more real. I had grown, not because I had a stable job or because my coworkers respected me, but because I no longer felt the need to prove anything to anyone. I still called home now and then to check on Mom's health. The conversations were short and gentle, no longer laced with bitterness. Dad didn't say much, but once he told me, "Your mom talks about you a lot, about your work. She's proud. She just doesn't know how to say it." I didn't ask for more. I smiled, thanked him, and changed the subject. Because I understood, some things don't need to be spoken aloud to be real. Natalie lives in Portland now. She just started her first job after completing a mental health coaching course. She sent me a picture of the small class she leads, along with a short note. "You once told me to find something for myself. I think I finally get it." I replied with a heart emoji and a quick congrats. No need for long explanations. Between us now, the connection wasn't about obligation. It came from a sincere effort to understand each other. Late, but honest. I no longer resent my family. I don't romanticize the past either. I see it as it was. A chapter that hurt me, but one that also taught me how to stand. And because of that, I now treasure kindness, even the smallest kind, in the present. I've reconnected with a few old friends from Seattle, people who supported me quietly but whom I had drifted from while running away from my past. Here, in this bustling city, I've begun building a different kind of family, not through blood, but through respect, care, and the understanding that we all have tender places that need healing. At a small gathering once, a close friend asked me, "Evelyn, if you could go back to when you were 17, would you change anything?" I sipped my tea and shook my head. No, because without those days I wouldn't know how strong I really am. And maybe I wouldn't have learned how to love myself. I used to live to be seen, acknowledged, loved. Now, I live because I deserve a full life, unconditionally, without needing anyone else's validation. I hung a simple frame on the blank wall in my living room. Not a certificate or diploma, but a handwritten quote I crafted on handmade paper. "You are enough, always were, always will be." Every time I come home late, every time I feel overwhelmed, I look at that quote, and I remember what I've walked through. I wasn't born into a perfect home, but I've learned how to build one for myself, with bricks made of effort, self-respect, and a heart that no longer longs for what's behind me. Evelyn's story is proof that being born into a lack of love doesn't mean you're doomed to suffer forever. Though she was never truly seen by her family, she walked through the darkness alone and built a strong, successful life. Evelyn didn't choose resentment, she chose growth. She learned that true family is built on respect and unconditional love, and in the end, it was her resilience and self-worth that brought her lasting happiness. What do you think about Evelyn's journey? Have you ever felt the same way she did? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more powerful, emotional stories about family and self-discovery. I still remember that night vividly. The night my life changed forever. Back then, I was just an 8-year-old girl, curled up in the back seat of an old car, clutching the stuffed bear I had never been apart from. The night sky was calm, a deep blue streaked with faint orange glows from the streetlights. I didn't feel uneasy because our destination was Grandma Eleanor's house, a place where I always felt safe. Grandma always welcomed me with a gentle smile, the warm scent of freshly baked cookies, and comforting hugs. Every visit to her house was special, because I knew she would tell me wonderful stories and let me touch her treasured collection of old books, something only I was allowed to do. But this time, things were different. The car came to a stop on the gravel road in front of her porch. I waited for my mother to turn and look at me, but she just sat there, gripping the steering wheel as if it were the only thing keeping her steady. Her face wasn't angry, nor was it sad, just cold in a way I couldn't understand. My father said nothing, staring straight ahead, avoiding my gaze as if my very presence made him uncomfortable. Finally, my mother turned around, her voice so quiet that I almost didn't hear it. "We just need a little time to sort things out, Allison. Be a good girl and stay with Grandma for a while, okay?" No further explanations, no promises of when they would return, not even a hug. I nodded, trying to be obedient, just like she expected. I still didn't realize something was wrong. I still believed that tomorrow or the day after they would come back for me. But as I stepped out of the car, dragging my small backpack with a few hastily packed clothes, Grandma Eleanor was already standing at the door, her eyes filled with sadness but still as gentle as ever. I turned back one last time. "Mom." The car was already pulling away. No wave goodbye. No one looked back. I ran after it for a few steps, my chest tightening as the taillights faded and disappeared down the road. I didn't cry. Not because I was strong, but because I hadn't yet understood that I had just been abandoned. Grandma Eleanor wrapped me in her arms, gently patting my back as if to reassure me. She didn't ask any questions, she simply led me inside, where the familiar scent of chamomile tea lingered in the air. She made me my favorite dinner, chicken noodle soup, but I just sat there staring at it, unable to take a bite. That night she read me a bedtime story, the same one I had heard countless times but still asked her to read again. Her voice was slow and soothing, but I couldn't focus. When the lights went out, I curled up in the warm bed, burying my face into my stuffed bear, waiting for the familiar sound of a car pulling up outside. But the only sound outside was the wind. The next day I sat by the window, eyes fixed on the road in front of the house. I waited. 1 hour, 2 hours, the whole day. No one came. I kept waiting. A week passed. Every afternoon I sat there, watching every car that drove by. My heart leaped at the sound of an engine, only to sink again when I realized it was a stranger. 2 months. My parents still hadn't come back. When my classmates talked about their families, I just smiled and said nothing. I stopped asking Grandma Eleanor when they would return because I had begun to understand. They weren't coming back. But no matter how much I understood it logically, emotions were different. Every night, when the house grew silent, I pulled the blanket over my head, trying to stifle the quiet sobs that caught in my throat. I didn't want Grandma to hear, didn't want her to worry. But on some nights, she still came into my room, sitting at the edge of my bed, her wrinkled hand gently rubbing my back. "It's not your fault, Allison," she whispered. "Some people aren't ready to be parents, but that has nothing to do with you." I wanted to believe her, I truly did. But how could I when the truth kept haunting me, when the same question kept repeating in my mind? Why didn't they choose me? Grandma Eleanor was never one for flowery words or grand gestures of affection. But she loved me in her own way, with patience, with warm meals placed on the table every day, with simple yet profound lessons, and most of all, by never mentioning those who had abandoned me. Her house was small, nothing like the lavish mansions I had seen in magazines, but it was always warm. She had an old Toyota that she still drove, even though she could easily afford a newer one. The house had bookshelves stretching to the ceiling, filled with the old books she cherished. Every morning, I would see her reading the financial section of the newspaper, sometimes nodding in approval at an article, sometimes furrowing her brows in thought. I didn't understand the numbers she read, but I knew that whenever she closed the paper and looked at me, her eyes always held pride. "Why do you like reading that stuff?" I once asked on a quiet morning, absent-mindedly stirring my cereal. She set her tea down, the corners of her lips curling slightly. "Because knowledge is power, Allison, and when you learn how to make money work for you, you'll never have to depend on anyone." At the time, I simply nodded, not fully grasping the weight of her words. But I didn't know then that the lessons she taught me that day would stay with me for the rest of my life. Under Grandma Eleanor's care, I slowly adapted to my new life. I stopped looking out the window every day, no longer waiting for a strange car to appear. She taught me how to bake cookies, how to tend to the small flower garden behind the house, how to think logically instead of letting emotions take control. And most importantly, she never once let me feel unloved. She was also the first to recognize my love for science. One day, when I was 9, she walked into the kitchen and found me experimenting with something. I had mixed baking soda and vinegar in a cup, eagerly watching as the bubbles fizzed over the rim. "Well," she said, crossing her arms as she observed, "looks like we have a scientist in the house." I looked up, my cheeks flushing slightly with embarrassment. "I was just trying something." She smiled. "Experimenting is the best way to learn, Allison. But if you want to create something bigger, perhaps we should do it the right way." The next day, she took me to a bookstore that specialized in children's science books and let me pick out anything I wanted. I chose a book about simple chemical reactions and a small experiment kit. She never said no when I asked for more books, and she never let me believe that anything was impossible. By the time I was 13, I had worked on a project about bacteria and how they reacted to their environment. I spent hours researching, experimenting, and recording results. When the state science fair approached, I nearly gave up, afraid that I wasn't good enough. But Grandma Eleanor wouldn't let me quit. "Allison, success isn't about never failing," she said, looking at me firmly. "It's about continuing even when you feel like giving up." Her words kept me standing. I didn't just participate in the competition, I won first place. As I stepped onto the stage to receive my trophy, I searched for her in the crowd. And when I saw her standing in the back row, her eyes filled with pride, I knew that every effort had been worth it. The years that followed passed peacefully, but Grandma Eleanor never stopped preparing me for my future. On my 18th birthday, she arranged a small dinner at our favorite restaurant. It wasn't anything extravagant, just my closest friends, a few old teachers, and people she considered family. After everyone had left, she handed me a small velvet box. "For you," she said, her voice warm. I opened the box and found a delicate necklace with a tiny key pendant hanging from it. "What does this key open?" I asked, running my fingers over its smooth surface. She didn't answer right away, just smiled. "You'll understand someday." I didn't press further. I knew she always had a reason for everything she did. At the time, I didn't know that this would be the last gift she ever gave me. I didn't know that just 3 months later, I would receive a phone call that changed everything. And I certainly didn't know that this tiny key would open the biggest door of my life. I got the call on a quiet afternoon in the middle of the month. When the hospital's number appeared on my screen, I knew something was wrong. My hands turned cold as I picked up, and when the voice on the other end spoke, calm, polite yet urgent, I knew my life would never be the same again. Grandma Eleanor was gone. A sudden heart attack. She hadn't had time to call anyone, hadn't left any final words. The nurse said it had happened quickly, but that did nothing to ease the pain crushing my chest. I hadn't gotten to say goodbye. I hadn't gotten to hold her one last time. I hadn't told her how much I loved her. The days that followed felt like a blur. I ate because I knew she wouldn't want me to fall apart. I arranged everything, handled the funeral, greeted the guests, because that's what she would have wanted. But inside, I felt hollow. The house was cold now, missing her voice, missing the warmth in her eyes whenever she looked at me. The funeral took place on a gray, somber day, as if the sky itself mourned her loss. The church was packed. Former students of hers traveled from all over, some now doctors, engineers, teachers, all saying that she had changed their lives. I sat in the front row, my heart tightening as I listened to each story about her kindness and wisdom. And just when I started to feel like she was still here with me, just when I began to find comfort in the beautiful memories of her, they appeared. My parents. I sensed their presence before I saw them. My whole body tensed, my breath caught in my throat. Then I turned my head, and at the far end of the church, they were walking in. My mother looked different. Her hair now streaked with gray, her face no longer holding the youthful look I remembered. My father had gained weight, but he still carried himself with the same self-assured stance. Except today, he wore a mask of feigned sorrow. They walked toward the front row, as if they had the right to stand there, as if their presence was about genuine grief for Eleanor rather than for show. My chest tightened. 10 years. 10 years without a single word. No letters, no phone calls. Yet now, with Grandma Eleanor gone, they returned. My mother spoke first. "Ellison." Her voice was gentle, as if nothing had ever happened. "We came as soon as we heard. Your grandmother was a wonderful woman. I'm truly sorry for your loss." I stared at her, saying nothing. A part of me wanted to scream, to ask them why they were only appearing now, why, when I needed them the most, they weren't there. But I simply clenched my fists, holding on to my composure. My father let out a deep sigh, feigning sadness. "This has been so hard. I know you're grieving, sweetheart. But don't worry. You're not alone anymore. You're coming home with us." I felt the blood in my veins turn cold. "Home," I repeated, my voice sharp. My mother nodded, reaching out as if to take my hand, but I took a step back. "You're still not 18. You're still our daughter. Now that Eleanor is gone, you need family by your side." I laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. I could feel the weight of the stares around us, but I didn't care. I looked at them, their eyes filled with forced patience, but I wasn't the naive 8-year-old anymore. I knew they weren't here for me. They were here for Eleanor's wealth. I met my father's gaze directly. "Are you here for me, or for Grandma's money?" Silence. I saw my mother blink, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face, but she masked it quickly. My father leaned forward, his voice firm. "Of course we're here for you, Allison. We're family. What are you thinking?" A real family wouldn't have abandoned their child without a word. A real family wouldn't wait until there was something to gain before reappearing. I took a deep breath, my voice steadier than ever. "I'm not going anywhere." My mother's expression darkened. "Allison, don't be stubborn. We are your parents." "No," I said, locking eyes with them. "The only family I had is gone." The truth of that statement lodged itself in my throat, but I didn't cry. Because at that moment, I realized I no longer expected anything from them. They had left me once, and I would never give them the chance to do it again. The tension in the law office's conference room was suffocating. I could hear the ticking of the clock on the wall. Sitting at the head of the table, my hands clasped tightly in my lap. Across from me, a middle-aged man in a neatly pressed gray suit meticulously arranged the documents in front of him. Eleanor's attorney. I didn't know what to expect. A part of me felt empty, another part was terrified. But more than anything, I just wanted this to be over so I could leave. My parents sat across from me, wearing their usual expressions of forced patience. But I saw the flicker of anticipation in their eyes. They weren't here for me. They were here for what Eleanor had left behind. The attorney cleared his throat, turned a page, and looked at me directly. "Allison, my name is Richard Carter, your grandmother's legal representative. I am here to read her final will." I nodded, keeping my face unreadable. He picked up the document and began reading. "I, Eleanor Grace Montgomery, being of sound mind and acting of my own free will, hereby declare this document as my final testament." My chest tightened as his voice echoed in the room. The will detailed various charitable donations Eleanor had arranged, small gifts to her close friends. But when he reached the most significant part, his voice slowed. "All properties, investment holdings, bank accounts, and personal assets, totaling an estimated value of $52 million, are to be left entirely to my granddaughter, Allison Grace Montgomery." The room went silent. My parents froze. My mother reacted first. She shot up from her chair, her eyes wide with panic. "That's impossible. There must be some mistake." My father narrowed his eyes, his voice turning rigid. "This is not how things were supposed to go. We are her children. We have a right to this inheritance." Attorney Carter remained unfazed by their reaction. He calmly slid a folder toward them. "I'm afraid neither of you have any legal claim to Eleanor's estate." He pointed to a document on top. 10 years ago, you both signed this, relinquishing all legal guardianship over Allison. Do you remember?" My mother's face went pale. "That was just paperwork. We didn't mean—" The attorney shook his head. "This is a legally binding document. Once you signed it, you forfeited any rights over Allison, including any claim to her inheritance." I looked at them, waiting for a glimmer of regret, a sign that they realized their mistake. But all I saw was anger and desperation as their plan unraveled before them. My father clenched his jaw. "She must have been manipulated. There's no way she would leave everything to a child like that." Attorney Carter remained composed. "Eleanor was an extremely intelligent and meticulous woman. Before her passing, she ensured that this will was legally verified by multiple witnesses and attorneys. No one manipulated her." My mother's hands clenched, her voice trembling. "We are her family. We deserve at least a portion." "No," I cut in, my voice firmer than ever. They turned to me, shock and frustration evident on their faces. I met their gaze, my tone calm but sharp. "Family is the people who stand by you when you need them the most. The ones who love you unconditionally. The ones who raise you, teach you, and hold you when you're hurting." I took a deep breath, gripping the small key hanging around my neck. The last gift from Grandma Eleanor. "You abandoned me a long time ago, and now I'm doing the same to you." My mother's eyes burned with fury. "Allison, you don't understand. If you don't share with us, there will be consequences." I laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Consequences? Do you think I'm afraid? You taught me an important lesson. I don't need anyone who only wants me for what I can give them." My father slammed his hand against the table. "You'll regret this." Attorney Carter interjected before I could respond. "You have the right to contest the will if you wish, but I warn you, everything is legally sound. There are no loopholes to exploit." Their faces twisted with frustration. I knew they realized they had lost. Finally, my mother stood, her expression icy. "Mark my words, Allison. You may have all the money, but you will never have a real family." I looked at her, feeling a wave of emotion rise in my chest, but it wasn't pain or fear. It was relief. I stood, adjusting the necklace around my neck, and replied steadily, "I had a real family, and you were never a part of it." Then I turned and walked away, never looking back, because I knew this was the last time I would ever have to face them. I thought everything was over after the reading of the will, but I had underestimated their greed. A few weeks later, I received a call from attorney Richard Carter, informing me that my parents had filed a lawsuit to contest the inheritance. They claimed that Eleanor had been manipulated into writing the will, that she had been mentally unfit in her final years, and that an 18-year-old like me was incapable of managing such a large estate. I wasn't surprised. I knew they wouldn't give up so easily. But I also knew that Eleanor had prepared for everything. We had all the necessary paperwork, medical records proving she had been fully competent when drafting the will. Every asset had been legally arranged and transferred. There was no loophole for them to exploit. The case was quickly dismissed. I assumed that after their failure in court, they would finally give up. I was wrong. That day, I was at Montgomery Enterprises, the investment firm Eleanor had founded, when the front desk receptionist paged me over the intercom. "Miss Allison, there are 2 individuals downstairs claiming to be your parents. They are demanding to see you immediately." I sighed, setting down my pen and leaning back in my chair. I was exhausted by this endless cat-and-mouse game. "I'll be down." As I stepped out of the elevator, my resolve hardened. I was no longer the 8-year-old girl crying on a porch. My parents stood in the middle of the grand lobby, drawing the attention of employees and clients alike. My mother had her arms crossed, impatience written all over her face, while my father stood tense beside her. The moment they saw me, they immediately approached. "Allison," my mother spoke first, her voice still carrying that same false sweetness. "We need to talk." I kept my distance, folding my arms. "What is there left to say?" My father stepped forward, his tone deepening. "We can't let things end like this. You know that." I let out a quiet chuckle, devoid of warmth. "End like what? The way you abandoned me 10 years ago without a second thought?" My mother's jaw tightened. "Don't speak like that, Allison. I know you're upset, but this isn't just about the past. This is about family, about what's rightfully ours." I raised an eyebrow. "Ours? What right do you think you have to anything?" I looked straight at them, my voice cold and unwavering. "You didn't come back for me. You came back for the money." My mother blinked, but didn't deny it. My father took a slow breath, then leaned in slightly, his voice lowering into something darker. "If you don't cooperate, we'll have to take more drastic measures." I tilted my head. "Drastic measures?" My father clenched his fists. "We could make this public. The media would love a story about an 18-year-old stealing her parents' inheritance." I couldn't help but laugh. "Are you threatening me?" I crossed my arms, my gaze unwavering. "Go ahead, tell your story to the press." I took a step closer, lowering my voice but making sure every word carried weight. "Tell them how you abandoned your 8-year-old daughter without a word of explanation." My parents stiffened. "Tell them how you tried to deceive your own mother to take her fortune." My mother glared at me, but I wasn't finished. "Tell them how, for 10 years, you never once called, never once asked if I was alive or dead. And then, when Eleanor passed away, you came back, hoping to take what was never yours." Silence engulfed them. I saw it in their eyes, the fear. Not fear of me, but fear of the truth being exposed. They knew that if this story came to light, they would have no escape. Finally, my father was the first to turn away. His jaw tightened, and he muttered something under his breath that I couldn't make out. My mother lingered for a few seconds longer, as if hoping I would change my mind. But when she saw that I wouldn't waver, she lowered her voice. "Remember this, Allison. You may have the money, but you will never have a real family." I held her gaze, my resolve unshaken. "I have never been more certain of anything in my life." She pressed her lips together, then turned and walked away with my father. I stood still, watching them leave the building. This time for good. I didn't feel heartbroken. I didn't feel regret. For 10 years I had waited for a family, but now I understood. I had never lost one. I had Eleanor, and that was all I ever needed. I sat in Eleanor's old office, a room I hadn't dared to step into since the day she was gone. The afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, casting a warm glow over the dark wooden desk. Everything remained untouched. The stacks of neatly arranged financial books, the white porcelain teacup resting on the shelf, and the framed portrait of her hanging on the wall, her sharp yet kind eyes watching over me. Before me was a small wooden box, a sealed envelope resting on top. My hands trembled as I opened it. To my dearest granddaughter, Allison. Her voice seemed to echo in every word. If you are reading this, then I am no longer with you. That breaks my heart, because I never wanted you to feel alone. But remember, even though I am no longer in this world, I will always be watching over you, in every step you take. The handwriting was slightly shaky, but still precise. I ran my fingers over the ink as if somehow she was still here with me. You have always wondered why your parents left you, and I know that question has hurt you deeply, but the truth is, they didn't just leave you. They tried to take everything I had. When they realized I wouldn't be deceived, they chose to walk away. But I have never regretted keeping you. You were the greatest gift they unknowingly left behind. I clutched the letter, my heart aching. Allison, I'm not just leaving you wealth, I am leaving you a legacy. I spent years building Hope Foundation, a charity dedicated to helping abandoned children just like you once were. I quietly used my resources to give opportunities to those who had no one to protect them. And now, I want you to continue this work. I blinked, my throat tightening. I know you have the strength to do this. You have always been resilient, intelligent, and kind-hearted. Do not let the past hold you back. Use what I have left you to change the world in whatever way you see fit. At the bottom, her final words stood alone. I have always believed in you, and I love you forever. Tears fell silently onto the paper. I spent the following weeks learning everything I could about the Hope Foundation. The organization's office was in a modest building Eleanor had purchased years ago. Inside, I met the dedicated staff who had worked alongside her. People passionate about helping children in need. One of them, Linda, a woman in her 50s with streaks of silver in her hair, approached and took my hand. Sweetheart, Eleanor always said that one day you would come here. She smiled warmly. She believed you were the only one who could continue what she started. I looked around. The walls filled with photos of smiling children, files documenting lives that had been changed, letters from those who had once been orphans but now had a future. I took a deep breath. I don't know if I'm ready for this. Linda shook her head. You're here. That's already a great start. And I decided I would make it happen. Alongside managing the charity, I also took over Montgomery Investments, the firm Eleanor had built over the years. Initially, the board of directors doubted me, a young woman with no prior financial experience. But I refused to let them underestimate me. I spent hours studying, attending every meeting, learning from the best in the company. I remembered Eleanor's words, knowledge is power. And I used that power to prove I was worthy of the role. 1 year later, as I stood before the board, presenting my plan to expand the firm's investments into more social impact projects, I saw something new in their eyes. Respect. I was no longer just an heiress. I had become a leader. I could have bought anything, but I kept Eleanor's old Toyota. It sat in the garage, covered in a thin layer of dust, but I never had the heart to sell it. Because it wasn't just a car. It was a symbol of the values she had taught me. To live simply, work hard, and always help those around me. I wasn't just the inheritor of Eleanor's fortune. I was the keeper of her ideals. I am not just her heir. I am her legacy. Life isn't always fair, but how we face adversity defines who we become. Allison was abandoned, she was hurt, but she refused to let her past define her. Instead of being consumed by betrayal, she rose above it, turning her pain into purpose. A true legacy isn't measured by wealth, but by the impact we leave on the world. By continuing Eleanor's mission, Allison didn't just find her calling. She proved that we are not defined by what we have lost, but by what we choose to build. What do you think of Allison's journey? Did she make the right choice in standing up to her parents' greed? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to follow the channel for more inspiring stories about family and life.